There's few things worse for your guitar's tone than buzz. And I don't mean the tinny, annoying sound of fret buzz, although that is a problem, but instead that electrical humming or hissing that can really overpower your guitar's sound. Now, from my experience, it's usually more than one thing that kind of pile on top of each other to make the problem worse. So we'll look at it one by one, and hopefully by the end of this, you should have a nice buzz-free sound. So let's start by looking at your guitar. If you've got a Stratocaster or any other guitar with single coil pickups, then you've probably noticed that there's a buzzing that usually gets worse the more electrical equipment is around. It's a really typical complaint with single coil pickups, and unfortunately it's just what they do. But there are a few things that you can do to reduce it. Firstly, make sure to turn off any electrical equipment that you're not using, or at least move it away from your guitar. If you can't do that, like if you're recording or like me, you've got a bunch of lights around you, then you can try angling your body slightly. And what that does, it just faces your pickups away from any equipment, and that can reduce the buzz by quite a bit. If you want a more permanent solution, then you can actually shield your guitar's pickups against any stray electronic signals by putting a special conductive tape in the cavities. Failing that, you can always switch to humbucking pickups. And like the name suggests, these were designed to buck the hum, and it gives you a much less buzzy sound than single coil pickups do. But if you have a loud buzzing sound that only goes away when you touch your guitar strings, then that might be a grounding issue with your guitar. All the metal and electronic parts in your guitar need to be connected to ground, which is done by using a grounding wire inside your guitar. And this is a problem that I actually had with one of my guitars, where the ground wire on the bridge had come away, so I was getting that really annoying buzz sound. It's a really easy job to fix yourself if you're handy with a soldering iron. But if you're not comfortable with that, I would say just take it to your local guitar store, because it's a very easy problem to fix and they'll be able to sort it, no problem. Another guitar problem that can cause buzzing are dirty potentiometers, or pots. If your pots have some dirt or rust built up in them, then it can cause hissing. And I usually notice that this only happens when the guitar isn't at max volume. So anywhere between 0 and 10, you get that annoying hissing sound. And that's happening with this guitar right now. In most cases, you'll be able to sort it out just by spraying in some switch cleaner and then turning your pot up and down, and that cleans it out. But if your pot's too far gone, like this one is, then you're going to need to swap it out for something new. Again, it's a really simple and inexpensive job that you can do yourself. So that's our guitar sorted. Now let's look at our amp. The first thing is that a higher gain setting means more buzz, and that is perfectly normal. But if you want to rein it in, just try dialing the gain back just a little bit. This doesn't mean changing to a clean sound, but just turning the gain down even a little bit can help rein in some of that hissing and humming sound. I also find that it makes my guitar sound a lot tighter and more responsive as well. If you do still want the super high gain sound but without the buzz, then you can use a noise gate or a noise suppressor pedal. It doesn't remove the hiss, but it helps tame the worst of it. Another thing is that loose parts can actually cause hum problems. So if you've got anything rattling around, then just try tightening it up and seeing if that helps. Usually the biggest culprit is the transformer, and I think that's the problem that I had with my amp, and it did go away after I tightened everything up. Likewise, if you've got a tube or valve amp, then any old or damaged or even dislodged tubes can cause a problem and will need to be either replaced or just put back in. It's another really straightforward maintenance job, but just be careful when you're working with amps because they can store a lot of electricity. Now, if your amp's fine but you're still getting noise, then it could actually be your house's wiring that's the problem. Busy circuits with a lot of things on the line can cause problems, especially if there's any household appliances or dimmer switches on the same circuit. But rather than rewiring your house, you might just want to try a power conditioner. And these work by filtering and regulating the electricity that comes from your outlet, so it just removes some of that unwanted noise. And this leads me on to the next big thing to watch out for, and that's called ground loop hum. It's a really common problem, and it's actually quite easy to sort out as well. The most common cause is using two or more pieces of equipment that don't share the same ground. usually if you're plugging things into different power outlets. So one of the easiest ways to fix this is just plugging everything into the same power strip. Just make sure that you're not overloading it. If you can't use the same power source and you have to use different plugs, then you can get hum remover plugs that work by breaking the ground loop while still retaining the ground. And that's really, really important. As a really serious word of warning, don't use cheater plugs or anything that removes the ground from your circuit. Doing this can cause life-threatening injuries or worse, so it's really, really not worth it. But speaking of connected gear, guitar pedals can also cause hum problems. The biggest problem, especially for beginners, is daisy chaining a lot of pedals together. If you are using a lot of guitar pedals together, I really recommend using an isolated power supply unit like this. What this does is it supplies each pedal directly with power, meaning less noise from interference and sharing dirty power, and it also breaks any ground loops, meaning we won't get that ground loop hum. But sometimes it's the pedals themselves that can make the problem worse. High gain pedals like this Boss DS1 will always have a little bit of hum about them, especially as you turn up the gain on them. And it's the same for compressor pedals. Even though they're not making the buzz themselves, what they're doing is just raising any existing buzz in your signal so it becomes more noticeable. Also, if your pedal's damaged in any way, then that can cause hissing and humming as well. Another tip that's specific for wah pedals is to keep them away from any power sources, as there's parts in here that can act a bit like a radio antenna and put some of that noise into your signal. Finally, let's talk cables. If you're connecting 2 or more guitar pedals together, then you'll want to use a short patch cable like this. The longer your cables are, the more likely they are to pick up stray electronic signals, which introduces noise and hum into your signal chain. Plus, shorter cables are much neater and they'll help preserve your tone a bit more as well. And it's the same for your guitar cables. Unless you're playing a stadium show or a massive stage, then a 2-meter cable should be perfectly fine, especially if you're only playing at home. It's also really, really important to keep your cables away from each other and away from any power supplies, as again, they can pick up electronic interference and that will just mean more noise in your signal. So there we have it, a few different things that can cause buzz, and most of which are in your control to be able to fix. Let me know how you got on in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.